all that seems out of place, because I remember nothing about her, not what she looked like, or the sound of her voice, or even the touch of her hand. I do admit to having a few laughs imagining how history rewrote itself inside Stefan's head when my shiny brown head popped out. It's interesting being of color in a part of the country where Mark Furman has his own radio talk show. My parents have always encouraged me to be loud when I run into racism, but I can't count on racism being loud when it runs into me. Very few people come out and say they don't like you because you aren't white. When you're younger, it comes at a birthday party you learn about after the fact. Or later, having a girl say yes to a date, only to come back after discussing it with her parents, having suddenly remembered she has another engagement that night. Not much to do about that, but let it register, and don't forget it. I learned in grade school that the color of a person's skin has to do only with where their way long ago ancestors originated. So my mind tells me all racists are either ignorant or so down on themselves they need somebody to be better than. Most of the time telling myself that works. Once in a while my gut pulls rank on my mind, then I'm compelled to get ugly. I called All News, All Talk Radio a couple of days after the first time I heard the spectacularly racially sensitive ex-LA detective giving Spokane and the rest of the Inland Empire the hot poop on big-time crime fighting. The talk show I called had featured the mayors of an eastern Washington and a North Idaho town, declaring that the racist label put on this region is undeserved, blown out of proportion due to the presence of the Aryan Nation's fort over in Hayden Lake, Idaho, and the existence of several small militias spread out between central Washington and eastern Montana. The mayors had departed when the talk jock finally said, "We're talking with TJ from Cutter, about 50 miles outside our great city." I said, "So this racist label, it's undeserved?" "I believe it is," he said. "An entire region can't be held responsible for the ignorant actions of a few. Certainly you can't argue with that." "You're right," I said. "I can't. But if the racist label is about perceptions, and in this case undeserved perceptions, why would you guys have the Mark Furman show?" "Have you tuned into Mark's show?" "Not purposely," I said, but I was scanning the stations and landed right on him." "How long did you listen?" "Long enough to convince myself it was really him, that you guys weren't just pulling my chain." "Then you heard a man who knows a lot about crime prevention and an accomplished professional radio man." I said, "His voice was okay." The jock said, "What's your point, TJ?" "That if you guys are running the most powerful AM station in the region, and you're worried about people's perceptions of that region as racist, you might think twice before you give one of the true icons of racism in this country 2 hours of drive time radio every week." "We didn't hire Mark to talk about race relations. We hired him to talk about criminals and the criminal mind, and about the intricacies of police work. He's written books on the subject, you know." "You didn't hire him because of his famous name?" "No, sir, we did not." "So when you decided your listeners needed to learn about Spokane, Washington police work, you figured you'd get better expertise from a dishonored ex-LA cop rather than some retired veteran Spokane cop who might have covered Spokane streets for 25 or 30 years? He said, "How old are you?" "What does that matter?" "You sound like a kid." "You tell me why that matters, and I'll tell you how old I am." "It matters because if you're too young, you might lack the experience to carry on this conversation intelligently." "I'm a 56-year-old retired Spokane policeman," I said, and paused a moment. Guess I don't have the voice for it. I hung up. I'm really not bothered by the race thing most of the time. At least I can say I don't bring it up first. And I've never wanted to be anyone else, and I don't want to be any other color. My bio daddy must have had a pretty good brain because I have a big-time IQ, and Simmet says monster talent in articulation. Plus, I'm almost 6'2" and just a little under 200 pounds. I can stuff a basketball from a standstill, and I've been clocked in a little over 10.4 seconds for 100 meters. When I was 13, I qualified for the Junior Olympics in 2 swimming events. I'm even a pretty fair cowboy, having spent parts of 3 summers at Little Britches Rodeo Camp. That's a pretty fair resume for a guy who, until this year, never participated in 1 second of organized high school sports. And I'm not hard to look at. Mr. Simmons said